Do you want to learn how to play this classy jazz sound, but you're not sure where to start? Well, in today's lesson, I'm going to teach you 3 exercises to help you master the classy jazz sound. Plus, you'll learn what I call the classy jazz progression and how to use these chords on any melody. So if you're ready to play in style, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, first, I want you to see how I'm playing these chords, and then I'm gonna break it down for you step by step, showing you exactly how to build these chords so that you can use them on any melody. These are called locked hands or block chords, and they were popularized by the jazz pianist George Shearing. So how do you play these chords? Well, that's what I'm going to show you next. But before we do that, if you're enjoying the video, please hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. All right, the first step to playing these beautiful classy chords is to learn what I call the classy piano progression, and it goes like this. Doesn't that sound beautiful? And what I love about this progression is that it only uses 4 chords and they're very simple to play. So we're gonna do a quick review of these chords and then I'm gonna teach you how to play the locked hands technique on these chords. So the first chord is a D minor 7. It's a very simple chord. And the next chord might surprise you. Normally in jazz, we'd go to a G7, but for this sound, I actually like to go to a D diminished 7 chord. You could actually think of this as a G7 with a flat 9. It's a lot like a D diminished. So that's going to be your second chord. The third chord is a C major 7. It's a simple chord. And the fourth chord might surprise you. We're going to actually go to a C diminished 7 for this chord. And normally when you play this chord progression, you would play an A7 at the end so that when you repeat the progression, you're back to your D minor 7. Well, guess what? You can use the C diminished 7 as a substitute for the A7, which is your 6th chord. All right, so here's the full chord progression. D minor 7, D diminished, C major 7, C diminished. All right, now that you've learned the classy chord progression, you're ready for step 2. And in this step, you're gonna learn how to play these beautiful locked hand chords on each of the chords from the chord progression. So how do you do this? Well, first, you need to understand what locked hands are. So here's an example. Let's say you have a melody on a D minor 7 chord, and the melody goes like this. Well, here's what the same melody sounds like with locked hands. Or what if I had this melody on a C major 7? Well, here it is with locked hands. What I'm doing is I'm taking the melody and I'm playing it in octaves. So we're sort of locking our hands together by playing both notes together. Now the magic of this sound comes when you add 3 notes in the middle of that melody. Okay? And what this does is it creates a 5-note chord with the melody on the outside. Now you might be thinking, that sounds great, but which notes do I use in the middle of the chord? Well, that's what I'm going to teach you next. So we're going to start with the first chord in our chord progression, the D minor 7. For this chord, you would typically use the D Dorian scale to build melodies on this chord. For example, you might have a D and a melody like that. So you want to be able to harmonize any of the notes of the D Dorian scale using the locked hands chords. And once you can do this, then you can easily play different melodies on your D minor 7 chord. Okay, first note of the D Dorian scale, the D, we're going to harmonize it with these chord tones from the D minor 7 chord. Okay, really simple. Next, the E, we're going to leave the same notes in the middle. You get this beautiful D minor 9 chord, which sounds lovely. The third one, you're going to use the chord tones from D minor 7. The next one's kind of interesting. Okay? This is the exception where we use an E in the chord instead of a D. Okay? So it has a really nice sound there. Next is the A, just using the chord tones from D minor 7. And then the B, we're going to play like this. And finally, the C. Now, I encourage you to make up some of your own melodies with this scale. For example, you could play something like this. Or something like this. Now for the D diminished chord, you're typically going to use melodies from the D diminished scale, and it's actually a very simple scale. If you start on D and you go up whole step, half step, whole step, half step, you end up with this really cool scale called the D diminished scale. I know it looks kind of weird, but it has an amazing sound. When you use it in chord progressions. So how do you harmonize each of these notes using the locked hands technique? Well, starting with the first note of the scale, we're going to play a D diminished with the notes on the inside. Okay? Next, we're going to move the outer notes up, keep the inner notes the same. Then we go to the F. We're going to play the notes from D diminished on the inside. Now we're going to move the outer notes up. This is a beautiful sounding chord. Then we have our D diminished here. We're going to move the outer notes up to B flat. Beautiful sounding chord. And then our D diminished with the B on the outside, just using the notes from the chord. And finally, we're going to move the outer notes up and keep the inner notes the same. All right, you've learned your locked hands scales for the first 2 chords in the chord progression. You have 2 more to go, and then I'm going to teach you these 3 essential exercises that you can use over this chord progression. All right, the 3rd chord in the chord progression is your C major 7 chord. Typically, you would play the C major scale over this chord, so you'll want to know how to harmonize each of the notes of the C major scale using your locked hands technique. For the first note of the scale, the C, we're going to use E, G, and A as the chord tones in the middle. For the next note, we're going to use E, G, B. The third one, the G, A, and C. The fourth one, the F, we're going to use A, C, and D. The next one, the G, we're going to use these chord tones, A, C, and E. The 6th note, the A, we're going to use C, E, and G. And the 7th note, the B, we're going to use C, E, and G. Now you might notice that I'm switching between the 6th and the 7th of the chords as I move up the scale, and that is something that you can do. In fact, on some of these chords, like this one, you could use the 6 or the 7. So sometimes you have several options as to which chord extension to use. Now before I teach you the last scale, I encourage you to make up some melodies using your C locked hands chords. Melodies that are simple like that will help you master this technique. All right, the last chord in your chord progression is your C diminished chord. And on this chord, you would typically use the C diminished scale. Again, it looks like a weird scale, but it's actually pretty simple to play. If you start on C and you go up whole step, half step, whole step, half step, all the way up the piano, you end up with these notes. And again, I know it looks like a weird scale, but when you use it in your chord progressions, it can sound amazing. So first note of the scale, the C, we're going to use the internal notes of a C diminished 7th chord. Then we're going to move the outer notes up, same notes in the middle. The next note, the E flat, we're going to use the notes of C diminished in the middle. Then we're going to go up a whole step on the outer notes. Beautiful chord. Then on the G flat, we use the notes of C diminished in the middle. Then we're going to move the outer notes up. Really beautiful chord. And then we have our C diminished with the same notes in the middle, and then move the outer note up to the B, and this concludes the scale. Now, it's going to take you some time to master these scales, and I remember when I was first learning block chords, it felt like a lot, but it's very important to pace yourself, focus on each one of these scales, really get it in your fingers, and then you can move on to the next step, which is to start using each of these scales over the chord progression. And I also wanted to mention that if you really want to master your block chords, you want to be able to confidently play them in any key, over any chord progression, and on any tune. Check out our Level 7 Foundations learning track. In this learning track, you'll learn everything that you need to know about block chords. You'll study them in every key, over every chord type, and you'll learn how to apply them to the most common chord progressions in jazz and some really fun melodies. So I'll put a link to that below. All right, congratulations, you made it to step number 3, and in this step, you're gonna learn the 3 essential exercises to master your locked hands chords. And everything that you've been learning up to this point has prepared you for these exercises so that they'll make total sense and you'll start to actually be able to use these chords in your playing. For exercise 1, we're gonna practice playing a simple melody over your original chord progression. And then I'm going to show you how to harmonize it using your locked hands chords. So here's what it sounds like with locked hands, and then I'll break it down for you. So we're starting with the D minor chord. We're using the chord tones that I taught you earlier. And then on the D diminished, that beautiful chord. Okay, again, these are the notes that I taught you earlier in the scale exercises. Then we're going to bring it down. And now we're on a C chord, so we're going to use the internal notes. Okay, that's going to be twice. And then C diminished. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, and we're going to move those outer notes down. And then the D minor 7. Okay, we're just using the chord tones. And then we're going to use a cool note here. Okay, it's kind of a colorful note. The D flat, and we're using the notes from D diminished in the middle, moving the outer notes down, and then we're going to end on the C major 7, and then go to that C diminished. Isn't that gorgeous? Now I'm going to teach you 2 more exercises, but I want to quickly show you what this exercise would sound like with the included backing track. Check it out. Here we go. By the way, this lesson comes with 2 downloadable backing tracks. The lesson sheet music is downloadable, and you can change the key of this entire lesson with a click of 1 button with our smart sheet music, so I'll put a link to all of that below. All right, for exercise 2, we're going to use a very similar melody. We're going to start on the A, and then we're going to use the notes from the D diminished scale. Okay, and then on the C chord, we're going to use a similar melody. And then on the C diminished chord, we're going to use notes from the C diminished scale. Okay. And then on the D chord, we're going to go to the G chord, and then the C chord. And for this one, we're going to use notes from the C diminished scale. And here's what it sounds like with locked hands. So the first chord, D minor 7, using the internal notes. Then there's the B diminished, coming down. Then the C chord, okay? And then the C diminished, beautiful chord. We're going to bring this down. And then on the D minor 7, here's the B diminished. And then the C chord. And then the C diminished. And we bring this down like that. And here's what it sounds like with the backing track. Here we go. All right, for exercise 3, we're going to use another similar melody. This time we're going to start high on the C, and then on the D diminished, we're going to use the notes from the D diminished scale. And then on the C, we're going to play C diminished, okay, D minor 7, and then D diminished. Those are the notes from the scale, and then the C, and then C diminished. Now here's the same melody with locked hands. So we're going D minor 7, and then on the D diminished, okay, there's that C sharp down to B, and then on the C chord, up to the C diminished, and down, again using the internal notes that I taught you earlier, and then on D minor 7, here's the D diminished, really beautiful. We're going to bring those outer notes down, and then the C chord to the C diminished, and bring the outer notes down with the internal notes. And here it is with the backing track. Here we go. All right, the last thing I want to teach you is how to connect all three of your exercises to create one larger exercise. So this is the final step. I'll play it for you slowly and then we'll do it with the track. So we'll start with exercise 1 and we're going to start up high. Same thing as before. Then we go to exercise 3. And finally, we go to exercise 2. And here's what it sounds like with the backing track. Here we go. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the lesson, please let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.